So next up, podcast listeners, listen to this. New York State Senator Thomas O'Mara, who's a Republican, is blocked from subpoenaing nursing home data. So Thomas O'Mara, he's a Republican in the state assembly in New York, and all he wanted to do in committee was to have the permission to subpoena all of the information about nursing homes. And what Cuomo did, the governor of New York, during the peak COVID months, when Cuomo sent the individuals who had been diagnosed with COVID at the hospital or other testing centers, but they weren't actually sick enough to be hospitalized. So where did he send them? He sent them to the nursing homes. And so Thomas O'Mara, well, of course, then we have to finish the story. So what ended up happening, right? Well, what ended up happening is thousands upon thousands, actually tens of thousands of individuals died. And they were all the elderly in those nursing homes because they're sharing the same building as these patients who are recovering from COVID, but not sick enough to be in the hospital. And so they're sharing the same air, they're catching COVID, and yet they're the ones that are dying, and the people that were put in the nursing homes to recover are the ones that are surviving. So obviously, Cuomo's policy is a complete, and was and still is a complete disaster. And so all Thomas O'Mara, who's a Republican in the state assembly, wants to do in New York State is to have a hearing that allows him and the Democrats and Republicans to look at the data to find out, is it really worse than what we thought? Is it worse than what we thought? Or did they underreport the deaths? Because there's a lot of evidence that the deaths that actually occurred in the nursing homes were way underreported. So here's an example. So someone goes to the hospital, and let's just say they're 40 years old or 50 years old. They are diagnosed with COVID, but the hospital says, well, look, you're not sick enough to be admitted. We need you to go to nursing home X. They send that person to nursing home X. That person stays in nursing home X for 14 days. Meanwhile, 50 people in the nursing home get COVID. Half of them get hospitalized, die in the hospital. But because they died in the hospital, they weren't really marked in New York State as nursing home deaths. They were like, yeah, well, they had COVID and they died, but they died in the hospital, not in the nursing home. So obviously, good old New York Governor Cuomo is trying to hide as much as he can. So Thomas O'Mara, who's the Republican in the state assembly of New York State, he made a motion in committee about let's subpoena all of this information once and for all and have full transparency. We have that motion that he made on a clip, and here it is.
I would like to move a motion that this committee, by a majority vote, issue a subpoena to produce all records relative to nursing home deaths due to COVID.
I didn't get the courtesy of even a heads up that you'd be making this motion, and instead you decided to ambush me and the committee.
Chairman, if I may be heard.
It has been. You're not recognized, Senator O'Mara.
So that's the committee chairman saying, you're not recognized, Senator O'Mara. So he's actually a senator in the New York Assembly. And you got, look, here's the thing. All that he wants, Thomas O'Mara, is to have the information about the nursing homes. So can you imagine being one of the individuals who has parents or a parent who has died in a nursing home, or as a result of the incompetence, and all you want is more transparency and more facts. You have a Republican who's trying to get that information, and then because there's a supermajority in New York of Democrats who control the assembly, right? They control the state and the assembly, as well as the governorship. They control all levers of power. They don't want to let this information out. So here's O'Mara on his motion again. We had that second clip, and here it is.
The bombshell report from the Attorney General last week on the nursing home deaths. So we felt that the appropriate time to finally push the issue. I've been calling, and my colleagues have been calling, for the issuances of these subpoenas and a full investigation of this matter for months now, probably 8-9 months. And we bring up the request for a subpoena. They shut off my microphone. The chairman does not even allow the committee members to take a vote on it based on his counsel telling him there's a rule, but that rule does not exist.
Yeah, so here's an article about this. So New York State's legislature is putting up roadblocks for Republican lawmakers trying to investigate the Cuomo administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic in nursing homes. New York's Democrat supermajority on Monday blocked a motion to subpoena records of the Cuomo administration. The New York Post reported that the motion was made by Senator Thomas O'Mara, the ranking Republican, on the Investigations Committee panel during a virtual meeting. So the whole purpose of the committee, the Investigations Committee, is to investigate, and they wouldn't let him do it. So O'Mara says, I brought that motion. The chairman of this committee has talked about issuing subpoenas on this matter for months. You know, the bombshell report from the Attorney General last week on the nursing home deaths, so we felt it was the appropriate time to finally push the issue, O'Mara said. So that's because the AG had started reporting information about all of the nursing home deaths and the fact that they were grossly underreported. And so do we know today how many people in New York died as a result of the mismanagement of the governor of New York to put nursing home patients together with COVID patients and vice versa? We do not. We do not have that information. And the chances are, quite frankly, that we're never going to get it. Why? Because Governor Cuomo wants to run for president. And as long as this information is suppressed, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing for him, terrible thing for the citizens of New York. And you wonder why people are leaving in droves. Well, here's one reason right here. So O'Mara also talks about the issue of sending COVID patients directly into those nursing homes. And he just kind of frames the issue, which we've already talked about many times before in this podcast, but it's just interesting to finally hear that people are speaking up that are elected officials in New York State, and they're trying to do something about it. And here is that final clip. Here it is.
The AG was Governor Cuomo's handpicked Attorney General candidate just 2 years ago. It's time that we find out really what the truth is here and just how devastating the governor's March 25th order to send COVID positive patients into nursing homes, like fire on dry grass, is the way the governor described the concern over nursing homes and COVID back then. Yet he ordered those positive patients into nursing homes.
It just shows you that the governor of New York, right, as well as the Democrats who control the legislature in New York, they are just so phony when it comes to how much they care about COVID deaths, right? It's like, oh my gosh, Donald Trump, he just did a terrible job. I mean, we have all these people that have died in the state of New York from COVID. And meanwhile, many of them, right, the lion's share of these individuals who passed were in some way or another connected to nursing homes. So we don't have that data. As long as we don't get that data, we're not going to be able to hold Cuomo accountable, which of course he's not going to be held accountable. I'm convinced of it, because he's going to make sure this information never gets out, because Cuomo, as I said before, wants to run for president of the United States. And that is New York State. Senator Thomas O'Mara is blocked from getting information about nursing home data.